Okay. Well, I can introduce the speaker. He knows what I'm going to say because he kindly sent me the information. And it's Dr. Ron D'Angelo, a member of the American Academy of Audiology. He joins us today, we hope, from Clear Choice Hearing and Balance. He has degrees from the University of Rochester, Syracuse University, Salus University, and he also attended Berklee College of Music in Boston. His specialty is diagnosing and treating disorders of hearing imbalance and vertigo, hearing conservation, earwax removal, which is important, and tinnitus. Dr. D'Angelo is also a professional musician, having played trumpet with Paul Simon. And it's great that everybody here is older because you know who I'm talking about. Paul Simon, Aretha Franklin, Frank Sinatra Jr., Natalie Cole, Chuck Mangione, and he is a member of the Time Funk and Bad Sneakers. Has anyone ever heard of that last group? No. I thought maybe I was the. Have you? You have. Oh, my hearing aids are not. Just repeat.
Bad Sneakers is a Steely Dan tribute band from Rochester here. And they're excellent. They're excellent, yes.
Well, okay, that's great that someone's heard about the Time Funk and Bad Sneakers. His publications include an article on hearing conservation for musicians in the Journal of the International Trumpet Guild and many blog articles on clearchoicerochester.com. Today, Dr. D'Angelo is going to talk about good music. And when we asked him, we were just keeping our fingers crossed that he just would not talk about issues relating to audiology because he is a superb audiologist, very knowledgeable, very good. But when he said what he was going to talk about, he said also he'll talk about good music, good hearing, and how to enjoy both across the lifespan. So now I'm saying in my notes, and now what a joy it is to introduce Dr. Ron D'Angelo. And he will be here, I'm sure, momentarily. Eric?
Just a quickie while we're waiting. The topic that came up during the Hope session revolves around places that have hearing loops, but they don't have them switched on. And one of the reasons for that is that the people in charge have normal hearing. They have no practical way to know whether the system's working or not before time. The churches I attend, I put standalone induction loop listening devices in the narthex, and you wear headphones and you can hear what's on the loop. I've got a sign with them that says, if you're curious what's on the loop, try this. And I've had the priest come up to me afterwards and say, oh, thank you. He says, first time I've been able to check the system myself ahead of the service. He said, I'm using your individual induction loop listeners to tell whether the loop is actually functioning. So it has dual purpose. By the way, those individual loop listeners get used at most of the services. I've been keeping track. So there's a lot of folks out there that are grateful for the ability to get the improved hearing during this. The downside is you can't sleep during the homily.
Very good. I was wondering if Pete would want to talk at all about the cochlear implant group for 1 second, because that was so successful. Pete, do you want to just talk about, just until Dr. D'Angelo comes, about the CI meeting that you hosted recently that was a wonderful success?
The cochlear implant group used to be a fairly small group that met here 2, 3 times a year. And then the bug hit, COVID, and everything was blown out of the water. So Sue asked me if I would coordinate this small group, and Fred Eltreath, Al Suffredini, and Sue and I got our heads together and said, well, we'll do Zoom. And so we thought, well, if we're doing Zoom, we can do more than 5 or 6 people. It's not dependent on Rochester alone. So we marketed to New York State Association's list of members, and we marketed to our list of members and colleagues. And then word of mouth took place. Janet McKenna's here. And she has a number of people, of her friends across the country, who she said, oh, you ought to come to our CI group meetings. So I have a list of close to 150 names on an Excel spreadsheet. And there are people, some snowbirds in Florida, number of people, Sister Ann from San Francisco, a number of people from California, and then there are probably 10 states total. And that's without really having thought a lot about how we could scale this up and market it more. But we meet 3 times a year. The next meeting is the third Tuesday in February, right? And then it's the Wednesday after the third Tuesday in May. The last meeting we had was a pass the mic, meaning we got together. There were about 15, 16 of us. And we just went around the room and asked people how they were doing. We had one man who will be implanted in February. We had a woman who was implanted that day or something. I mean, it was really kind of cool. The next 2 meetings will likely be with representatives from one of the cochlear implant manufacturers. We haven't had them for a while, so I imagine we'll do Advanced Bionics and Cochlear Americas in February and May, and I'm working to set those up even as we speak. But if you're interested in this, it's a way to join a group and hear about people who are thinking about cochlear implants or who have them. And so I guess that's what I have to say, right?
Thanks, Peter. That session, I sat in on that, even though I don't have a CI. And I gotta tell you, it was really instructive, just listening to people talk about their experiences with CIs. And I think our speaker has arrived. So we will move on. Thank you.
Dr. D'Angelo, get that jacket up and come up. They all understand why you were not here right at 12 noon, that your office scheduled an appointment for you at 11:30, and that you came just as quickly as you could. And I've introduced you already. I've said all of these wonderful things about you. And now I can actually say it is a joy to have you here. Thank you.
So you want me to definitely use this then? Yeah, okay.
Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, sure. See, I'm used to playing an instrument through a microphone, not holding it up to my face. No. I actually have one in my car because someone dropped one off for me today, but I didn't have a mouthpiece to play it. So you might have heard part of the story about how I had a patient that was put into my schedule. I don't know if I explained the whole thing. We lost an audiologist recently. She decided to take another job somewhere else. And so right now we have a brand new person who I have to train. So it takes even a little bit more of my time, which is fine. But anyway, good to see everyone here. I've been here, I think, 2 other times, which I want to say they were at night. They used to have these like an evening. And I remember once I came as a spectator for a gentleman named of Ed Loperinas. I don't know if anyone remembers him. He was a professor at Buffalo. I look better when I'm off camera, but and he was giving a talk on tinnitus, ringing or buzzing sounds in the ears. You might say tinnitus or tinnitus, which is one of the things that we specialize in at our office, and most audiologists do to some extent. And so I came with actually two patients that were husband and wife, and they asked me to come to it. So I said, of course I will. So I went, and that was very nice. And then once, which may have been in this room, I'm not sure. I don't know the church that well, but I did a panel discussion thing, and I believe it was Jared Teeter and me. Do you recall that? We sat down and people asked a lot of questions, and and I didn't know Jared very well, and we worked really well together. I thought it was kind of fun because he was a friendly enough guy, and we kind of deferred to each other's specialty or expertise when someone raised a question, And by the way, I will encourage anyone to ask questions at any point. I won't be irritated by that at all, because when I was asked to do this, I was thinking, all right, what could I incorporate? I'm sure people have heard talks about this and that. There's many different things that we do in audiology. There's many different topics within hearing and hearing disorders and hearing loss and things like that. And I don't even remember who had the idea that because I'm lucky enough to have two separate careers that kind of complement each other, that it might be fun to kind of try to tie that together. So if you don't mind, I can delve into that a little bit. So just as a way of introduction, I was born in Philadelphia, so I'm not a native Rochesterian, unfortunately, but I've been here long enough that I do root for the Bills by now. But the Phillies are my team, so sorry. When I was a kid, we moved from Philadelphia to a little town called Pottsville, which, has anyone heard of it? Yingling Beer is from there. Who? What's the name? Oh, okay. I might know the name because there's only. Oh, that's okay. Okay, no, I don't know that name, but anyway, and it was actually a very nice town to move it to in 1970. It's lost a lot of people since then because it was a lot of coal industry shrinkage and things like that. So that's what influenced me to probably leave. But around there, football and marching band were pretty much everything. If you weren't on the football team or the marching band, you didn't have a whole lot to do on a Friday night, and I tried to do both one year, and that didn't really work out, But anyway, so baseball and music were the two things that I always wanted the most, And when I was in high school, my fantasy adult life would be to play trumpet in the Tonight Show band in the winter with Johnny Carson, and to play baseball for the Phillies in the summer. I thought that would really work, because I wasn't old enough to really sort through how likely that scenario really was, and how hard those gigs are to get, Um, and I ended up starting college. Um, I wouldn't say I was a good student, but I got good grades, and I ended up going to Penn at Philadelphia for just long enough to realize I was not prepared for that because I went to a public high school, and it's a long story, but I just didn't feel like I was ready for that. I took a left, I hung a left, so to speak, and went to Berklee College of Music, which is in Boston. And I was there for 2 years, just long enough to realize I don't want to do this for the rest of my life as a full-time career, because it's a very, very difficult way to make a living. And there are a lot of people in this town who have done rather well. Most of them are in the RPO, who have fashioned a nice career 100% out of playing music, giving lessons, being on the faculty somewhere. And I just wanted to play the horn, to play the instrument. And if I've done anything smart in my life, it's probably not quit the instrument, even though I went into something different. Along the way, I went to University of Rochester, where I finally finished my undergraduate, and I met my wife, Laura. And Laura, I'm proud to say, has developed one of the biggest music theory programs in the country in the Webster School District. So she teaches music theory and AP music theory. And in fact, she was on the development committee to even write the exam last time for several years. So she would have to like have me put away if I would divulge any of the answers. Not that I care, you know, but I was privy to like secret stuff that students weren't allowed to see. Um, so I kept playing, even though I wasn't really a music major anymore. And I've been very fortunate to have had opportunities to play with some. I wrote some down. These are just. Oh, I put, yeah. Okay, nice. Yeah, so one of the cool ones that I got to know early in my stay in Rochester was Gat Mangione, and sometimes we get to play with his brother Chuck, you know, who was someone that I when I was a kid I didn't like to practice. Da, 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 da. I used to like to put records on and play along with the record. Buddy Rich, Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, Chuck Mangione was a big one because his music was very accessible. You can appreciate it even as an eighth grader, you know. And so there I am getting a chance to play with one of my idols, one of my childhood idols. Um, Connie Francis, Martha and the Vandellas, Natalie Cole was kind of cool. The Four Tops, the OJs. We did a little tour with them for a while because they liked our Rochester horn section. And they said, could you come on the tour with us? And apparently it ruffled some musicians union feathers when we showed up in Erie and we were from Rochester. Because of the theater we were playing at, they didn't appreciate the fact that they were not asked to play, and I had to stay out of that because I'm just here to. It was during a semester break in graduate school, which was at Syracuse University. Um, but it's been very gratifying to be able to play with some of these people and continue that. So I feel like if I've done anything smart, it's the fact that even though I have this really nice career in audiology, which I love, I can still do the other thing and love it even more. Because when I was doing it full time when I was a music student, if I missed a note, I was angry the rest of the day. You know what I mean? It kind of took the fun out of it for me. You know, after I graduated from U of R, I had to find something to do, and I was never the kind of person that always knew exactly what he wanted to do. I always had like medical school in the back of my mind. I think most of my teachers in high school figured I'd be go to medical school or something like that. And I didn't want to have to go back and retake organic chemistry and a few other things. So my wife has a cousin who was the head of special ed in the Brighton School District for a while, and she said, "How about speech pathology?" And you all know what speech pathology is, or they use the term speech therapy. She said, you know, they need more men in the field. You'd be good at it. You have a good ear because you're a musician, that kind of thing. And so I actually did that for a couple of years at Syracuse as a graduate student, just long enough to realize there's another thing I didn't want to do the rest of my life. Um, and there's a number of reasons for it. I thought the courses were very easy, but the clinic part where you're actually working with little kids and adults or whoever on producing R's and S's and things like that, it just didn't, I wasn't good at that part. I don't think I had the patience. You know, it's something that requires a lot of patience. It's a really incremental, slow progress in these things, you know, and what I like about audiology, which I eventually found, is that you can make rather quick changes in people's lives, and it can be very gratifying in that sense. You know, something, and not everything happens overnight, of course, but compared to speech pathology, it's just the pace of what we do suited me much better. Um, and so it was a sister program. I don't know why audiology and speech pathology tend to go together in college programs, but they do. It's kind of always been that way. And I think a lot of us audiologists, and probably a lot of the people you've heard talk, may have had a similar journey than I did, that they started in speech and they ended up in audiology. It's more science based. It just suited me a little better. You know, I was always kind of a science nerdy, you know. Um, so after I finished my training at Syracuse, I did one of my placements was actually in the city school district here. So that was kind of cool because that's something that most audiologists don't get a chance to do, as a city, like a school district audiology job. And that's completely different from what most of us do on a regular basis. You're going to different schools, making sure teachers are wearing their headsets and the students are wearing their gear so that they can hear what's going on in the classroom. And my first job, I don't know if anyone remembers a practice called Better Hearing Centers. There used to be some advertising, you know, And I work closely with a couple different ENT medical doctors, which is also a really nice background because I learned a lot more about medicine than most audiologists would typically get to do because of getting to work with two of these gentlemen. Um, learned a bit about taking wax out of people's heads, and things like that, even though it wasn't my domain in those days. We left that to the surgeon. But that eventually got purchased by a national corporation, and again, that really didn't suit me. And my former colleague Christine had started her own practice called Clear Choice, and once I had enough of the other position, I don't remember if I called her or she called me, and she said, I got a place for you. And so we kind of got back together, and she and I, and later on with the help of some other people, built up Clear Choice into a rather busy practice. And unfortunately, that it's busy enough that it caused me to be a little late today. So I appreciate everyone's patience on that one. I was hoping maybe you'd have like business to attend to, that kind of thing. Um, but our whole thing is we've always prided ourselves on being as full scale audiology as possible. So of course we do hearing aids like pretty much everyone does. We do an awful lot of, I think just this morning I've taken wax out of 6 different heads. We have a couple different ways of doing that. In some states, it's not within the scope of practice of audiology to do that. And some audiologists don't touch it for some reason, but I do because I happen to enjoy it. And it's just something I feel like I'm pretty good at, and it helps with the flow of things because we don't have to say, listen, Mr. Jones, you've got all kinds of wax in your ears. We can't do anything for you until you go somewhere else and get it cleared out and then make another appointment. That's just not very efficient. And in some states, they actually have to do it that way. But for us, we can do it right there, and it only usually takes just a few extra minutes. One of the things that I started to do at Better Hearing Centers was do some writing. There was a couple different like tabloid style newspapers that are held. Like what was it called? In Good Health. Is that still out there? That one's there, but there was one called the Golden Times. Do you remember that one? Does that I don't want to insult anyone if it's still a big thing. Is Golden Times still out there? I think it was a senior citizen oriented publication. It came out either weekly or monthly, and Dr. Musinger and I used to write articles for that, which means that I wrote the articles, and he would look at it and he'd change one word, maybe two, give it back to me, and we'd send it in, and we pick a different topic every month. And another nice thing about what I get to do on a daily basis is there's an awful lot of the scope is rather large of what we do. So if I can kind of put it in a nutshell, obviously I'm diagnosing hearing loss on a regular basis. I already mentioned I take a lot of wax out. Balance disorders, vertigo. I treat a lot of vertigo patients on a regular basis. I think yesterday I had 2 patients in one morning. Oh, okay. That had what we call positional vertigo, benign positional vertigo. Have you heard of that one? People say, I have these crystals in my ears, and that's what that is. There are little stones. Did you know, what is the main job of the ear? Can I just ask an open question? Oh, so you guys were studying ahead, right? Or did I give it away? Or did you just happen to know? Yeah, the ear originally developed as a balance organ. Because balance in the inner ear has to do with moving fluid around, jostling around, and tripping little cells. They call them hair cells. Everyone's heard of, they say, I got these hairs in my ears. It's not hair like on your head. It's cells that under the microscope look hairy. And when they go like this, you move that fluid in your inner ear, jostles those little, so they call them cilia at the end, the hairy part, and it sends an impulse to your brain and to your eye muscles and to your spine to keep you safe, to keep your head as far from the ground as possible, because your head, of course, is the most valuable part of your body. Everything important is up here. And so that's why the ear really developed. But it turned out some of those cells eventually got specialized to pick up vibrations in the air, which is really kind of cool, And we know of a lot of animals that have much better developed ears than we do. Anyone have cats? right? What happens if you take a cat and you flop it in the air? It will always land on its feet. And someone said, people like to say they have this gyroscope in their head. It's like this special magical thing. No, they have the same exact thing we do. It just works better. And they don't have to think about it. They're not that smart. I can tell you mine aren't very smart. But if you, they just have an innate sense of balance, and they always will right themselves before they hit the ground. And so hearing is a secondary sense that developed later on. And because that balances about the order, excuse me, because the organs of hearing and balance are truly about this far from each other, if that, the same fluid that flows through this balance section also flows through the hearing section. So there's just a very nice tie-in that when people often come in with balance disorders because they're walking into walls consistently, or they are having dizzy spells, or a combination of the above. Very often we find something having to do with hearing too, and sometimes the hearing patterns that I find in the test gives us a clue as to what's going on with the balance organs. Use the term differential diagnosis, which means gradually ruling this out, ruling this out. So if your hearing is the same on both sides, you don't have labyrinthitis, but you could have vestibular neuronitis, that kind of thing. And once we have a good idea what's causing it, then we have a better chance of being able to develop a treatment plan that would be appropriate and not a waste of your time, So hearing aids, of course, we do tinnitus. Anyone here have ringing or buzzing sounds in the ears, other than probably 90% of everyone? It's very common. They believe about 50 million people in this country have some kind of noises in the ears, phantom noise. I have, because of having drummers always on my left side. So I have about this much hearing loss in my left ear only, because Dave Cohen always sits on my left. Dave Cohen's a really great drummer, but he's not a subtle drummer. He hits the drums, And one of the bands I play in, by the way, that I've been in forever, is called Primetime Funk. And we do that. We're the house band for the Rochester Music Hall of Fame ceremony every year. And so we've gotten to play with people like Paul Simon, and Bob from Sesame Street was there once, one of the guys that I used to watch as a kid, So it's been fun to be able to get to know some of those people and play music with. Paul Schaefer from the Letterman show was a guest once, So David Clayton Thomas, yep. Yeah, he was really good at taking a compliment. He's not going to hear this, is he? He's not the most humble guy in the world. He knows he's good. Let's just say he knows how good he is, But because of the music thing, one of the things that I like to specialize in that a lot of other audiologists don't, just because it doesn't pay particularly well, is what we call hearing conservation. How do you keep what you have? And it especially comes in handy when I have a lot of musician friends and colleagues out in the community that do not want to end up crashing their ears. It's kind of ironic that the one thing that they love to do more than anything else, just play and listen to music, can actually it would be like if looking at paintings in the Louvre Museum would damage your eyes if you look too hard or something like that. You know what I mean? The only kind of, I think, if you looked at the sun, that'll damage your eyes. But other than that, I don't think using your eyes is going to damage them. But unfortunately, using your ears to sounds that are too loud or that last too long can damage it. And it's a hard damage. It's permanent, as I think we know. Has anyone presented on this topic before at some of these meetings? I don't know. I just don't want to be too redundant, but I think it's important enough that it bears, going into a bit. Real quick, one of the other things I do is, I don't know, any military veterans here? I have a contract with some groups that provide testing services for the VA. But because of we're not the VA, of course, and I'm a civilian and I don't work for the VA directly, but I provide some testing services to help veterans get service connection or compensation and pension after they have served, which I find another very gratifying aspect of what I do. In fact, I think I have 4 of them this afternoon when I get back. The reports take a while. Yes. Yes, we have found, and I assume you mean device, it could be a hearing conservation or hearing aids. I just had someone call the other day. He's someone that's has been in a number of local bands. I think he plays guitar. And him Kevin, and he's been doing it for a long time. He's probably in his early 60s now. And he had heard there was a company, he said, do you fit the brand Whitex? Anyone familiar with the brand Whitex? Technically, it's Videx because it's a Danish company. Correct, but everyone here says Whitex. And he said, I'd heard those are really good. And sure enough, I wrote him back. I said, yeah, call us. We do that brand. And that one has become the favorite brand among audiophiles and musicians. I think it's because the fidelity that it has. I really think I don't know if they still have him, but their lead engineer for a long time was a guy named Francis Cook, K-U-K, and he was just a fantastic audio engineer when it came to designing what kind of algorithms to plug to program into that hearing aid. And so for the fidelity, musicians always seem to favor that brand. Every brand that we have is good because we're not under any contract to only be able to fit this or that. That was one of the reasons I left that sort of corporate job I had, because you could only do a certain brand because one company actually owned the other, and that didn't sit well with me. It just wasn't for me. So now we have total autonomy in what we do. So there's that. So I can recommend a certain brand and a certain style of hearing instrument. Excuse me. And also, I have used musicians' earplugs. There are high fidelity earplugs. You know, there's an old saying: the best earplugs in the world, the best, absolute best, are any that get worn. You know what I mean? It's kind of like I once asked my dental hygienist, "Do you have a kind of floss that you, or maybe even my dentist, is there a special kind of floss that you think is the best?" It's like, no, just do it. You know, because I'm one of these three cleaning a year guys. Every 3 months, it's the same thing. I look at them, I say, I brush and I floss, and they look at me and they say, we know, we can tell you do. You're doing a good job. It's just not enough because you're just unlucky enough to build up a lot of tartar. It's genetic. It's based on chemistry or whatever. And the same thing about earplugs. They will all protect your hearing, but they don't all sound very good. So for a musician to put a piece of cotton in his ear or one of those squishy foam plugs, it'll protect his hearing. And that might be the trade-off that you have to do, but it's going to sound crappy. It's going to take out a lot of the high frequencies. Everything's going to sound dull. They're not going to hear the timbre, the sound of their own instruments as well. And again, I'd rather they do that than just do nothing. I ran into a very well-known drummer. I won't say his name, but he's from Rochester, and he's considered by many people the best drummer that ever lived. And he recorded for even Frank Sinatra, Steely Dan, all kinds of major people. And I just quizzed him about it. I saw him at Hicks and McCarthy for breakfast once in Pittsford, that place. And I said, do you use any kind of monitors? He goes, nah, like in-ear monitors, because there are monitors also. You see them on TV a lot. Entertainers, they'll wear, it looks like a wad of gum in their ear and a wire going over. And that's a monitor. And we use those on stage sometimes because you can hear everything without having to crank it really loud. And he said, nah, I just use the regular wedges, the speakers that blast up at you, in addition to his rather loud drums. And his wife looked at me and he said, yeah, his ears are shut. And this is a while ago. This is like 15 years ago, and I wished that I could have done something for him. But I have an easier time, no offense, but I have an easier time reaching the younger musicians. The guys that have been doing it that are my age or older, they don't like to change the way they do things, And one of the guys in a band that I'm in, a previous member, said, well, we could just do it the old fashioned way by not playing as loud on stage. And I said to him, everyone agrees with you, but is that realistic? You know how you get. You know what I mean? It's like telling a pitcher, don't throw the fastball too hard. You know what I mean? Or it's great if you don't swing a golf club too hard, right? You know if anyone who plays golf, you swing a golf club too hard, you're going to screw it up. But it's so hard not to do that, So we have to do whatever we're going to do. So I can always steer a musician into a proper fit for there are custom earplugs that have a hole in them. There's a filter that goes in there, and there's different strengths of the filter. And the 9 decibel filter is very weak. And I usually say, unless you're playing for Dave Brubeck, something quiet like that, quieter, then I think it's too weak for you. And the 25 decibel filter, I say, unless you're playing drums for Metallica, it's probably too strong for you, and if you don't hear well enough, you're going to give yourself repetitive stress injuries from trying to make up for what you can't hear because you're not going to get that vibratory feedback that you expect. So that happens too, but and I think they like when they come in to see me, they like how I'm not just trying to tell them what to do without knowing what they do. They know I've been on their side of the stage as well, so I think that's probably an advantage for me. Yeah.
They have to be so loud? Why do they think they have to be so loud that you can hear them in the next building?
That is a very good question. I do have an answer. So the question was, if he had seen live performances, live bands a number of times where it was just so loud, even earplugs, it was still too loud. And he was saying, why do bands have to feel like they have to be that loud? And I will tell you one anecdote is that I played a concert once at the War Memorial, the Blue Cross Arena, about 10, 15 years ago. And I actually saw it got a letter to the editor that it was too loud. And of all the acts that it could have been, it was Josh Groban. You would think Josh Groban is about as polite as it gets. You know what I mean? He's not exactly a rock and roller. He doesn't scream into the mic. He's actually was a very nice guy. He shook all our hands and thanked us for being there. And it was an easy gig. I only have to play on one song, and I made just as much money as the poor violin players that had to be up there the whole time. Score. But here's the deal: is that the band, the guys playing on stage, have no idea how loud it is out there. And they don't control it. It's the sound engineer. It's the guy sitting at that console twiddling the knobs who probably doesn't hear very well himself because the good ones have done it for a while, and most of them probably have hearing loss, and most of them are good, they're competent, they know what they're doing, but for some reason they have it in their heads that everyone wants to hear it as loud as possible. The last actual rock concert that I went to of that sort, which was also at the War Memorial, was a band called Rush. And Rush is very loud, but for some reason, some music just sounds more appropriate. And I was smart, being what I am, and I wore my earplugs. And it was loud, and we sometimes had to sidestep the speakers because if you're right in line with the speaker, you're going to get more of the brunt of it. I saw a David Bowie concert when I was in high school once, and it was outside at Hershey Park. There's a fairgrounds or something like that right by Hershey Park, and I noticed even back then, before I had anything to do with hearing, that if I walked in line with the speaker, it almost knocked me over. And you could just walk 3 feet this way, and it was fine. So positioning, if you're able to change where you are, that can help too. You know what I mean? And that's part of the strategies that I give. One of the things that I wrote, I actually had an article published in let me see if I say this correctly, the Journal of the International Trumpet Guild, because trumpet is my instrument, right? And I always wanted to write an article about how to preserve your hearing and protect it and still enjoy playing and still not have it be too much of a compromise. All hearing protection is a compromise. It's never going to sound as good as live hearing, but if the alternative is to not have any hearing after 10 years of doing it, then I would go with the imperfect solution, And so I wrote this article, and I had a friend and colleague who used to teach at Ithaca College, who was on the board for the International Trumpet Guild, and he got me published in that. And I gave a basic lesson in acoustics and things like that, and what sound is, how the ear works, and kind of took it from there, and the things that they could do. And some of the things that I said are, if you're in loud situations, like if you practice and you have a concert later, you probably don't want to practice and warm up right before your gig. You need to give your ears a break. It is actually true, is that the damage that a loud sound will do to the ear is not only a function of the intensity, loudness of the sound, but the duration, right? So a shotgun blast is incredibly loud, but it's very brief. And there's some studies that apparently show really brief exposures to impact noise like that might not do as much damage as a sound that isn't as loud but lasts a lot longer. You know, I still would not would like to be next to a shotgun when it went off. But as far as actual damage, do you know what happens in your ear when you're exposed to loud noises? I'll bet you don't. And this is where I probably should have prepared something a little more multimedia, but being a jazz musician, I like to improvise. You know what I mean? And just kind of yeah. Yeah, yeah. So he's saying it's something that when the sound comes in, it pushes the cilia over the cilia that I talked about before, and it pushes them over too far, and they break. And that's something like what happens. So we have, I mentioned hair cells, right? And they kind of look like a pear with a stem, and the stem flaps in the fluid. And when a sound comes in, if it's loud enough, it waggles enough that it sends a nerve impulse to your brain that you heard something. But we have two kinds of hair cells, inner and outer. The inner hair cells are the real receptors, and they are not they're not sensitive to soft sounds. So if we only had them, we wouldn't. We can't. And so we have what we call outer hair cells, which are amplifiers. They are biological hearing aids in your ear that you're born with, that unfortunately you start losing the day you're born. But it's a redundant system. We have so many of them that it takes many, many, many years for that to catch up with you, that it actually makes a difference. They say you can lose 30% of them before it actually affects your hearing. But people that have noisy jobs or hobbies, whether you like to shoot firearms, play music, you work in a jackhammer, working construction, working in a factory, a dentist with a drill, you know, all sorts of things. If it's done on a regular basis, what happens is those amplifier cells are a lot more susceptible to damage. And they kind of, yeah, they kind of, you know, if a wave of a loud or intense noise comes through that inner ear, there's a certain turn that's more uh, um, susceptible to damage than the rest of the inner ear. Unfortunately, it's the high frequencies. And most of us speak English. Most English or European languages have an emphasis for clarity, unfortunately, on the high frequency sounds. Sit, fit, bit, mid. You know, there's all kinds of words. The right, F. I'll get an F is, or TH actually is the softest sound in any language, right? There's only so hard you can blow air between your tongue and your teeth, right? It doesn't go that far. But those sounds that only carry like 5% of the acoustic power of speech are responsible for something like 90 to 95% of the meaning. So English, unfortunately, is a very hearing loss unfriendly language. Now, if we all spoke Hawaiian, which is mostly vowels, they only have like 8 sounds in their language or something, we probably would do better, you know, but we can't reinvent the language just to accommodate. I don't think anyone's going to do that just to accommodate hearing loss. Racquetball, 60 years. I'm just reiterating. Wow, that's kind of cool. My best guess, can racquetball, by the way, was a question, really have a profound effect on someone's hearing? My guess is probably not. I don't think those sounds would be intense enough, unless it's a really echoey place. And here's another thing: by that age, they say the better your hearing is, the more susceptible your inner ear is to damage. You have more cells to damage. If you have a pretty significant hearing loss and you're exposed to loud noises, it probably won't do a whole lot of further damage. Yeah. I suppose it's possible. I'm just not convinced that the sound of a racquetball hitting a net or a wall, right? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a great answer for that question. I know if you use my ping driver on the golf course, that thing's loud enough to wake the dead. It's just I hate I like my driver except the sound, you know, and so but even that I think it's so momentary that I don't think it's going to do any kind of um, long-term damage. But it's a good thought, and I suppose it's possible. But most of the people and most of the jobs, we're talking about military veterans that had to shoot an M16 and you know a machine gun. They had mortars coming in. I mean, things that are really really stupid loud. You know what I mean? Just offensively loud. Concerts like the one you're talking about before. You know what I mean? That's just if you go to one concert and you walk away and you have like in your ears and dull hearing, yeah, you just damaged some of those outer hair cells. The nice thing is in the cell, those hair cells can, oh, yeah, they're kind of grouped together like this, and they're linked at the tip. They call them tip links. And so when they waggle in the fluid, they waggle together. When loud sounds come in, what happens is instead of being damaged like shot, they're gone. They get separated from each other. And that's when the tinnitus and the dull hearing for a day or two happens until they go because the body always has an incredible ability to heal itself, usually, for things that are not totally deadly, right? So if you have enough times when this happens, eventually it's not gonna regenerate. They're not gonna go back with each other. And so then you have a situation where the real receptors can still function, but sounds are not loud enough because those natural hearing aids that you're born with aren't there anymore. You know, I want to see if there's anything else I want to cover because I like the idea of having questions like this because it keeps us on, you know. So I don't want to be too obvious about it, but some of the consequences of that kind of hearing loss, which to many of you might be painfully obvious, you know, hearing soft speech, right? If probably a lot of people, I got a lot of complaints in the office saying, you know, I can hear, but everyone sounds like they're mumbling, right? And if people really do mumble, that's not going to help either, right? That's just going to compound the whole thing. I told you I was married to a teacher, and she's kind of a mumbler at home because when she is in the classroom, she's got to project. She's got to wake these kids up or keep them awake. That's her job. I think when she comes home from that, she's had enough of that. So when she talks to me, she's not always projecting her voice like I'm a student, you know, which is good because I don't think I'd want that either. But sometimes it's like, what'd you say, you know? Yes. Really? Brother's a radio announcer, and when he calls, so who is in trouble when he calls, you or him? Ah, okay. See, now my uncle, my dad's brother, was in radio. He was in Seattle and Portland, Oregon, and he had the greatest voice I've ever heard. And he talked like this, and he filled the room all the time. And he always talked like he was broadcasting. He couldn't kind of get out of character, you know. Yeah, he had the voice. Apparently, he had a lot of female admirers when he was in Seattle, you know, from his voice. They didn't know what he looked like, and they didn't care. They just like to hear. And in those days, a last name like D'Angelo was too ethnic, so he went by his first and middle name. He was Rick Thomas. So I think a lot of people with Italian or Jewish or you know names that were might be considered too ethnic would change their names like that. But no, he always projected, so he was easy to hear, you know. But even then, if a person shouts, you can't shout your consonants, right? You can only shout your vowels, and people that have high frequency hearing loss can still hear your vowels. That's why shouting almost never solves anything, right? You know, and that's why it's almost like a stereotype. You know, your grandfather can't hear you, speak louder and louder, and finally he goes, you don't have to shout, you know, because you passed that threshold where not loud enough became too loud, and then the ears overload. Oh, here's another consequence of this kind of hearing loss. Does anyone here have hearing loss but found that loud sounds bother them more now than they used to? There's two terms we use for that. One is called loudness recruitment, which I think has been, I don't know if that's been kind of disproven as far as what happens in your inner ear, but um, part of the damage to those, I told you about those outer hair cells, the amplifier cells, the biological hearing aids. Part of what they do is they make soft sounds louder for you, but they also protect you from loud sounds. And so if the floor is down there for what you can just barely hear, and the ceiling is up there for what you can just tolerate, when people have hearing loss, the floor goes up and they can't hear those, but the ceiling comes down. So that's one of the challenges in fitting people with hearing aids is trying to fit people's dynamic range. So it has to be loud enough for them to hear it, but it can't go past a certain length, a certain level, or else they're going to reject it. They're going to say, this is too loud. And it distorts, and it can be, can be very uncomfortable, even almost painful for a lot of people. Another term we use is hyperacusis. Hyperacusis is an abnormally strong reaction or abnormally poor tolerance for loud sounds. And it's another consequence of noise damage. Even music, even oh, here's another interesting fact. Since I'm riffing here and improvising, they have done studies that have found that sounds or music that you like will do less damage than music or sounds that you don't like. I think it is. So even at the same level, even if you control for the volume and the duration, so if you like classical music and you're listening, if you're up close to the RPO is pretty loud if you get up close, in case you didn't know. And if you happen to like Beethoven and they're playing da 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 da, that will do less damage than if you go to hear a kind of music that you don't like and is the same volume level. Hi. Pass mic. Is there the white switch?
How about now? Okay. Can you talk about the availability of hearing aids to help people enjoy music? As a musician myself, I only wear one hearing aid, but I have a music program in there because speech is only part of the whole spectrum.
Right.
And the difference to me is like a channel has suddenly been switched on a stereo.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who, well, we don't go out and hear my granddaughter sing in chorus anymore because we can't understand what she's saying, or we stopped going to the Philharmonic for the same reason. Can you talk about hearing aids that can help somebody with that loss?
Right. And this plays into somehow some of the strategies that we use for musicians that want to get hearing aids. And we've always said that the two groups of patients that you have to take a deep breath before you deal with, because they can be the most difficult to please, would be engineers. Any engineers in the crowd? Because engineers are notorious for wanting to improve everything and thinking that they can do it better than these other people that have spent their life doing it, And we always say, if you're going to alter your hearing aid, at least wait until the warranty is worn up. And my nephew is going to Purdue right now in a honors engineering program. So we're looking forward to see what maybe he can get into hearing. I don't know. But so keep in mind, most hearing aids are programmed specifically to help people understand speech, right? Because that's the most important function of our hearing right now is communication, right? Helen Keller supposedly said, loss of vision separates you from things, loss of hearing separates you from people, which makes a lot of sense, and she would know, right? And so the algorithms that we use to program hearing aids are to maximize speech understanding, and we use something called compression. Remember I said we have to keep the volume between here, not getting below here, and not getting above here. So they compress things. And one of the consequences of that is if you listen to music, instead of having peaks and valleys, it's all like right here. Sounds like, which modern day pop music is that? Modern day pop music, they've actually done studies, is that it's the same thing over and over again. There's no variation. There's no peaks and valleys. It all stays at the same. It's like a TV commercial. They keep the intensity up because they want you to listen in the moment right now. So that doesn't help music because music has peaks and valleys. Music You have to be able to appreciate the different pitches, the different intensities, the different sounds of the instruments. So I talked about compression, which is where we compress the sounds from here to here. Well, for music, it tends to work better if we use the old-fashioned, what they would call linear. So every sound gets the same amplification. Musicians and people that want to listen to music probably would do better on those kind of programs, especially if they have a way to switch it back to the other one if they're trying to listen in their card game or to at the dinner table. You know what I mean? So that's why programmability can be a big deal these days in selecting hearing instruments. And a lot of them have these right on an app. You can have my phone. You can make some of these adjustments right on the phone, or if you got the little remote control. It's never, hearing aids, it's one thing that we have to tell every patient. They can't prevent further loss of hearing, and they can never restore normal hearing, as you know. Well, I'm telling you if you don't. Part of the reason, a lot of people will say, someday they'll be able to make a hearing aid that really works or that really does that. And what I usually say to them is that no, hearing aids work perfectly well. What's behind is medical technology, if you will, medical science in how to prevent or restore the inner ear damage. Because don't forget, no matter what you do to process that sound through a hearing aid or through any kind of listening device, it still has to travel through a damaged inner ear to get to your brain. So, for example, I couldn't recognize a single person out there right now, but I can see everyone crystal clear because my retinas work very well. It's the focusing mechanism, right? My lens is not focusing the light in the right spot. Just unlucky that way, right? So glasses just refocus the light. That would be the same as having what we call a conductive hearing loss, in a sense, is that your inner ear would work perfectly well, but there's something interfering with the sound getting in. Those people do spankingly well with hearing aids because they don't have any inner ear damage. They don't have that distortion from the inner ear damage. But most kind of hearing loss that people have, like noise damage, is more like being legally blind, where hearing glasses might help, but they're still not going to be able to see anything clearly, no matter what you do to that light. So it's not, which is not to say that hearing aids aren't worth it for anyone. There are some people, some very, very rare cases where their hearing is so poor that you got to say, well, we could try it, but we're not sure what we can do. And that's where cochlear implants come in, So did you? He had his hand up first, so.
Hearing conservation, what do you recommend? Because I'm here, not because I have hearing loss, because I hear too much, with all the tinnitus. So I want to make sure there's such a live music scene here in Rochester, as you well know, it's one of the best in the country. And I want to be able to enjoy my music and not have so many, when I put those stupid foam pieces in my ear, I so much. So what do you recommend? I'm supposed to come to you and get custom fitted, or how does that work?
There are custom fit ones, which are fantastic. There's also ones that are not custom fit that you could get from like Amazon. They're called Ety plugs, ETY, and they have a similar filter in them. They just might not fit your ears as well. You know what I mean? There's like 3 different sizes, like small, medium, and large, or something like that. And they're the little flange, little foam thing, and then stick them in your ears. That might be a good place to start.
But what about the tinnitus part? Is that something that how would you handle that? I just use background noise like air machines in my house.
Yeah, when it comes to tinnitus, that's a whole other can of worms right there. I mean, I could spend a whole other hour talking about that,
That's okay. They don't mind.
Oh, is it time? Time? Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Did you have one more question?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
You got it. I want to hold everybody up. It just, I thought this was a presentation on tinnitus. I don't know. Maybe I read the program wrong.
All right. Well, I tried to incorporate it, but I think it had more to do with just protecting what you had.
Okay.
I have one quick question.
Oh,
One
quick,
question.
because we lose our captioner like in
Okay.
1 minute.
If you have hearing aids and they're set up correctly, can they damage your ears over time? Okay.
No, not if they're set up properly by a professional, which is a good argument against over-the-counter hearing aids.
And that's another whole topic. We would like to thank Dr. D'Angelo so much for coming. Your talk was just fabulous. It was wonderful. May we all give him a good round of applause. Was the drummer from Rochester by any chance Gene Krupa? He's the only one I could think of, the drummer.
No, this is
Oh.
someone much younger than that.
Oh, okay. Okay. We thank you, and now we'll have, but really, thank you so much, and you must have driven very quickly to get over here. We had the police, we had the police department look the other way. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Doctor. It's very interesting. That's great. Okay, remember to fill out the evaluation forms. In January, Peter's gonna run a panel of CI users. In February, the tech team is gonna present. The technology is moving very fast on assistive listening devices and so forth, giving us opportunities to help a lot of people that we normally don't think of helping. And then in March, the healthcare task force that's working on hospitals will be running the session. And what we're working on, we're very interested in any input you folks have. And as I look at the average age around this group, I'm thinking most of you have probably been in a hospital within the last couple of years, okay? And you might have some tales to tell. So bring your tales in March because you're going to help us with what we're putting together, okay? Thank you very much for coming. Remember, it's December. Christmas is a couple of weeks away, so have happy holidays, and we'll see you in the new year in 2024. It doesn't seem possible. We're here already. Take care. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.